Hello and welcome. In case you're not sure what you downloaded, what you're streaming, this is the Golf and Greenkeeper podcast, and I am Steve Smith. Welcome to the year 2021. Let's see what kind of shit the world can dish out to us this time. Only joking. I know I got a little bit aggressive. I need to calm down, but let's get excited about golf. Now, for those of you who've not listened to the podcast before, and for those of you who have, we'll do a quick wrap of how it works. It's the year 2021, so we'll just, for the uninitiated most especially, we'll tell you what's going on. So we start off with Walking the Fairways, which is a segment about news of the happenings on golf courses throughout Australia, where I try to bring you some updates about what golf courses are up to, whether it's construction, maintenance, different types of things, some architectural work, whether there's architects involved, all that sort of stuff, just to keep you excited about where you're playing and what you want to go to, and even give you a bit of, what's the word I'm looking for, just some real drive to get out there and try different courses you haven't played before. So we all love our home tracks, but it's also really good to enjoy other golf courses and experience other things as well to test your game and also have a lot of fun and experience different things around. So that's a brief on Walking the Fairways. And today I'm going to have the segment called the Greenkeepers Shed come back, where I try and give you a little bit more of an understanding about what goes on in making a golf course in terms of keeping it, but also maintaining it. So, when it comes to golf course setup or management of the greens and way to manage the area and the grounds of a golf course, so all those bits and pieces, try to give you a bit of an insight that I can give you. And hopefully those sorts of things will give you a bit more of an understanding of just what goes on and how much work's involved, but also something that might be able to help you out there that you can read into a little bit more and improve your game, and you can see things a little bit better. Let's get stuck into Walking the Fairways. I just want to say thanks to all the greenkeepers out there that worked their backsides off through what's been, for the east coast of Australia, a very wet summer, and for the west coast of Australia, a very dry summer. But I just want to thank all of the greenkeepers out there, and I've been a superintendent in the past, so I know what's involved at this time of the year. But a thank you for working around the clock, as it were, through the public holidays, through this family time, this holiday time, where a lot of people enjoy catching up with family and friends, and a lot of people like to spend some downtime and they get out there and play golf. Without the greenkeepers out there, and I want to say this to all the listeners, without the greenkeepers out there working on public holidays like Boxing Day, New Year's Day, let me tell you, Christmas Day is one of those days as well, where the superintendents usually, or the assistant superintendents, will get in there, make sure everything's still alive and not dying in terms of disease or water requirements, just some basic stuff that they'll go in there and make sure, because it's a trying time when there's so many days off, being public holidays and things like that. And also just getting the courses prepped for play so that we can go out there and enjoy. I'm on the Northern Beaches, and we've been in lockdown since a week or so before Christmas, and it's been difficult to do anything. We can't really do anything much at all. But for those around the country, the rest of you, I want you to say thanks as well to the greenkeepers of your local course, the course where you're a member at, or the course that you played at, or you're going to go and visit. It takes a lot of work still during this time when we all want to be relaxing and spending time with family and friends. The greenkeepers have still got to get in there and look after those courses. And in the peak of summer, the last thing a golf course needs is no one on it looking after it, because it needs to be cared for, and that's what happens, and that's the way it rolls. And as greenkeepers, we know that, but I just want to say thanks, and I hope you all say thanks to those greenkeepers out there, because it's a difficult time to have to go in and look after the golf courses as much as needs to be done. This year, a little bit less so on the East Coast, but there's still always work to do, and hopefully some of you out there got to enjoy some of that time off as well after doing the bare minimums on those public holidays. So thanks to all the greenkeepers out there. You guys are doing a ripper job as always. With Walking the Fairways, I'm going to start off in Sydney, and we're going to start down with Manly Golf Club on the northern beaches of Sydney. Now, one of the things that happened, it was actually just at the end of last year. Manly saw some minor changes happening on the golf course, which was sort of done with consulting architect Ross Perrott. You might know Ross Perrott's name from Thomson Wolveridge Perrott in the past, or Thomson Perrott, but Ross Perrott does also some work now with Carrie Webb, which you may or may not know. It's Perrott Webb is their combination that they do. But Ross Perrott's been consulting architect at Manly for quite a little while now. And some of the work that he's just recently been sort of overseeing was some changes to the third hole at Manly. Now, the third is a ripper par 5. It's a great hole with it's got a couple of little water carries throughout the hole as you traverse your way down. And it's got a little sort of a creekish style small water body in front of the green itself that you've got to negotiate. Now, what they've done on the third is they've removed the greenside bunker around the third green, hence the term greenside bunker, of course. They've removed that green, which was problematic during periods of rainfall, not necessarily high rainfall, just rainfall, but high tides, because those water bodies in and around Manly Golf Club, and if any of you aren't locals, you don't really know it, they're tidal water bodies. And if you have high tides and unusually high tides, and we've seen some high seas of late with weather patterns that we've got, high rainfall, that sort of stuff, the greenside bunker was below the water level at these high tides. And if you combine that with rainfall and those sorts of things, basically the bunker had nowhere to drain. It was below the water level where it would drain to. So obviously the water doesn't get away from the bunker through its drainage system. It probably does the opposite and stays there, if not going backwards. So they've dealt with that and decided to remove it with Ross Perrott sort of under his guidance. But in doing so, they've also got rid of that, but brought the green itself forward towards the tee, towards that sort of lagoon little water body that's in front of the green. And that sort of just changed the characteristics of the hole a little bit, but it's given them overall more pin positions to utilize on the green itself. It wasn't one of the biggest greens on the course. It was on the smaller side of things. But when they did the work, the ground staff have done the work. They've used some turf that they've got on site ready for these types of projects. And that really gets them to get straight in. It's local turf, green spec that they maintain the same as all their other greens when you have nursery greens and that sort of stuff. So they get it, they cut it, they put it down, and it's very, very quick to establish because it's not brought in from other areas throughout Australia. It's not a different type of grass. It's all the same type of specific grass that they have on the greens at Manly. So it's very quick to blend in. It's usually quite seamless. And it doesn't take very long at all before you don't even notice that it's a new extension. But that's what they've done there. Got rid of the greenside bunker, brought the green forward a little bit, allowed more pin positions to happen. And sort of, it's just a change that they needed to deal with, which was a problematic area on the golf course and particularly on this hole. So a positive move by the team at Manly, and certainly with Ross Perrott by Manly Golf Club. And if you know the hole, you'll see the changes, and hopefully you'll see that they're for the better in this regard. I haven't seen it myself on the ground, but look, a positive thing for Manly and something to look forward to next time you play there. Now, also at Manly, this is something I'm just going to give you. It's a little point of note, and it's sort of something I want to start letting you guys know about. That happens on golf courses all the time, but we don't broadcast about it. We don't gloat about it. We don't profile about it. We don't, in a sense, tell the world of these little things. These are some of the positive things that I want to let you know about. And in the past, I've spoken about how superintendents and greenkeepers, that we manage and maintain the local environment and the landscape of golf courses. And something that's been done previously. This is something that's been done previously at Manly Golf Club. But it's about this environmental side of things that golf courses do that a lot of people just don't realise. Now, Manly Golf Club, in the past, when they've done a big course rebuild, which was done 10 plus years ago, I'm sure now, it's been quite some time. Through that work, they've gone around and introduced a lot of native areas, and they're done specifically for certain reasons. So what happened at Manly, this is a point specifically at Manly Golf Club that was done, is the area around the 7th green and the 8th tee was planted out with threatened species from the swamp oak floodplain forest community of flora. Now, there's a few different types of species that are included in that swamp oak floodplain forest. That is a mouthful to say. and it's specifically done to provide forage for a range of endangered local wildlife species of birds and bats. Now, let's just move away from the bats that have been spoken of as starting this pandemic that we're in, the reason that some of us are in lockdown. But I'm talking about the native bats, native birds, and local wildlife that are from that area of the northern beaches, but also the flora that was planted around this green and tea complex in and around the water bodies around there, that was done specifically to try and get some of these this wildlife as a bit of a sanctuary area for them. And golf courses all over the country, and indeed certain ones all over the world, do these types of things. Now, this is specific to Manly, and I just wanted to point out that this stuff is being done. It's not always talked about, and I think we need to broadcast it more, because I think it's quite important that people know that golf courses aren't just an area. And I've spoken about this at length many times over, that golf courses try to look after the environment as much as they're a place to play golf and for us to enjoy ourselves on, in the term of sport, in terms of socially as well with friends. It's something that golf courses more and more are doing, and I think it's great that they're doing it. And I think it needs to be spoken of more, much, much more. And these are the positives about golf courses. They aren't just turf out there, cut short, and we play golf on it. There's so many other ancillary areas around the play of golf where we care for the local environment, and we try and retain and protect that local environment. And that includes wildlife. That includes some of these native species that are endangered, these native plants that are endangered. We protect them. That's what we do. So I just want to introduce that to you a little bit, and I'll probably try and talk about that a little bit more as I come across it and as I find out about it. But a good point for Manly, a good point for golf courses in general, and something that I think we all need to be aware of so that we can talk about it positively as well, not just within ourselves, but to the broader community. That when we think about a golf course, it's not just a golf course, guys. It's a local environment that protects the local flora and fauna too. Moving to Queensland. Now, it's just been announced that McMahon's, which is a construction company, will be building the new golf course at Cannon Hill Community Links in the new development of Minnipai at Cannon Hill in Brisbane, which is a suburb of Brisbane. Now, McMahon's are a golf course construction company, among building other sporting fields. So they do lots of sports fields and football fields and hockey fields and all that sort of stuff as well. But they also build golf courses. And they've recently been named to build the new Cannon Hill Community Links up there in Brizzy. So interesting stuff that it's just been announced by the Brisbane City Council, I believe it is, that are overseeing that sort of the development of the golf course and everything. And with McMahon's looking after it and in the construction, you'll see it start smashing out in no time. Good quality products that they deliver. So, yep, that's another step forward in Cannon Hill. And we look forward to the coming, I think it's in about 18 months that they're hoping construction to be finished, weather permitting, pandemic permitting, whatever else is permitting. But it's got this far. They're still pushing through with it. So we'll keep an eye on it. I'll keep you posted, guys, about Cannon Hill and McMahon's doing the build. Now, going to stick in Queensland, and some new work has recently commenced. We moved to the Gold Coast here. Some new work has just recently commenced in the last few days. Actually, it was at the turn of the year at Hope Island. Now, we all know about Hope Island. It's a Thompson Woolridge Parrot design. I'm pretty sure it was the three of them at the time when it was built. And what's happening at Hope is that we've never really seen many changes to Hope because it's a stalwart of the area. One of the earlier resorts to be built at the Gold Coast, and it's a fantastic golf course if ever you get the chance to get up there and play it. And it's worth every cent to play, I might add. Very different to a lot of the other style of resort courses up there. Hope is very Peter Thompson as well, and it's a wonderful golf course. Well, the new work that's happening up there at Hope Island is they're building a new 9th hole. Now, that might sound a little strange because you might say, what was wrong with their par 4 9th hole that they previously had? Well, there's a little bit going on. So I'll get into it. The work is being done much like the construction company I just mentioned at Cannon Hill. The work is being done at Hope Island by Nathan Bradbury of Golf Spectrum. Now, Golf Spectrum are the company. Nathan Bradbury is the owner of the business, and I've met up with Nathan a few times. Lovely, lovely guy, and he's got a very, very good mind and a very good skill with building golf courses. An Aussie bloke. He's originally, I believe, from Sydney, is where I caught up with him anyway. But Nathan's got a good team with him, and he's built a very good business in construction of golf courses. He's done a lot of work around the place too. But who is Golf Spectrum, you might ask? You've probably never heard. We've heard of the other companies that are around that build all sorts of stuff with golf courses if you're in the game. But if you're not, if you're around the edges of the golf construction side of things, you might say, who's Golf Spectrum? Well, I can tell you, they were the construction company that turned Tom Doak's reimagined vision of Concord Golf Club in Sydney to reality. Yes, Tom Doak's redesign at Concord was built by Golf Spectrum and Nathan and his team. Now, that just shows you how good he is. So he got the contract down at Concord and absolutely smashed out the build and the design work under Tom's guidance at Concord. And we've all talked about how great that golf course has become since it reopened with a full new redesign. And that's a testament to Nathan and his team at Golf Spectrum and the skill level behind them. So there might be a new player, but they've got Nathan's got a lot of skill and a lot of experience. And he was formerly a superintendent as well for a period. He's done a whole lot of stuff in greenkeeping, so he knows his stuff. And to get up there and do the work at Hope is going to be really exciting. So what's happening at Hope is the 9th, as I mentioned. Now, the 9th, as it previously was, which was a par 4, like I mentioned, was heading back to the clubhouse. Now, that's going to be completely removed. And they also used to have an old sort of a target green practice area, which was like it had 3 little target greens on the other side of a water body, as it were, and a practice tee. You know, you're hitting sort of upwards towards sort of 6 iron, that sort of stuff to get to these target greens and down to a wedge. But it wasn't a driving range. It was just a practice area. And that's what they had at Hope. Now, all of those 2 areas, the 9th and their practice area, are going to be gone. They're basically removing those 2 things, and that's what they're rebuilding. And the lake that the practice area is on is what's going to become a full water carry par 3 9th to finish the front 9. And that's a pretty big deal. So you're going to be kind of now hitting towards the clubhouse from the other side of the dam in a reverse style of the way that the practice area was sort of hitting from over the back of the dam, hitting back towards the clubhouse. And if you know that area, like I said, if you know Hope well, if you played there before, you might kind of know what I'm talking about. And then the 9th fairway will become a driving range where you're going to hit from where the 9th green used to be back down the fairway towards the old 9th tee. So, and it's going to give them a full length driving range. Now that's a pretty big deal because that's something that they've not had at Hope before, is this full length driving range. So you'll be able to hit upward, you'll be able to hit driver and practice properly on the driving range. Now, this is to make way for a new development that's just been released called the Gallery Hope Island, and they've got about 46 blocks of land to build on over the back of the golf course, which will ultimately be adjacent to the new 9th hole. And it'll sort of give Hope Island, the whole point of it is they're going to give Hope Island this full-length driving range, and that's probably the big ticket change for me, and a pretty cool 9th hole water carry par 3 with testing, something a little bit different. So overall, I think the course total will be a little bit shorter. It's trivial. They're obviously trying to get this development in and work around that. So I don't think it's going to be a bit of a backward step for the club. I think it's going to be a positive step in a different way, something that we probably didn't think would happen like this in terms of changing it to a par 3 and that sort of stuff. But they're going to get a full-length driving range, like I said, and there's going to be some pretty swanky-looking houses being built over the back of everything next to their new 9th hole. So a little bit of work happening at Hope. And look, I will let you in on a little bit of a secret. I'm actually talking to Nathan from Golf Spectrum at the moment, and I'm going to try and get him on the podcast for you so we can get a real inside view of just what's going on up there at Hope Island. Pretty exciting. Now, in a La Nina year, the east coast of Australia often gets hammered by lots of rain, and it gets super high humidity with that rain. That also translates to awesome storms, obviously. Now, I can say awesome because I'm one of those weird storm chaser people who just loves getting out there and chasing. I try to get those photos of lightning and all that sort of jazz as well. Call me crazy, but I've always loved it. Now, that said, I could think of nothing worse than a storm when I was a superintendent, because the cleanup is absolutely always a pain in the ass. There's nothing more frustrating. Absolutely nothing more frustrating than you get the course Mickey Mouse, gets hammered by a storm, and you just got to go out and fix everything. It's a pain. But that said, that's what happens during these La Nina years where we have a higher rainfall on the East Coast. And this year's no different, right? But at Catalina Country Club on the south coast of New South Wales at Bateman's Bay, they recently were on the receiving end of one hell of a storm front that brought down a number of large trees. Now, Superintendent Dennis Grounds was no doubt wondering how many black cats he must have run over to have a summer to summer period from last year to this year, with last year's devastating fires in the region that threatened the course, and they come up really close and burnt the boundaries of the course, and obviously devastating to the community and the houses, and they lost lots of houses and stuff down there. So that was terrible last summer, and then this summer they get plenty of rain, and it's just bringing trees down with storms. They just must be wondering. Dennis must be wondering what the hell's going on. It's a topsy-turvy time, and to get those two completely different black and white summers back to back is pretty full on, and no rest for the wicked, I can tell you. There's a lot of work going on down there, and from one year to the other, complete opposite ends of the spectrum. But look, they've copped it down at Catalina Country Club, and Dennis Grounds and his team are doing a great job, like they did last summer. They're going to be doing a great job and cleaning everything up and getting the golf course, the wonderful golf course that is Catalina, I might add, 27-hole facility, for getting it up and ready for their members and guests again to get out there and enjoy their golf as they always do down there. But they're not the only ones that have been copping a flogging. I've also heard of some large trees coming down at Penrith Golf Club in Western Sydney on Boxing Day. Again, they had a really large storm front sweeping through over the Blue Mountains of Western Sydney, and it just hammered the western suburbs. And lots of trees come down there as well on Penrith Golf Course, so they copped it. And look, that said, there's going to be more of this stuff. We see these rolling storm fronts, low pressure systems developing and delivering huge rainfall totals, strong winds throughout the rest of summer across the East Coast. This is what happens. These are the challenges of looking after a golf course. Now, for the average player, you might not go out there regularly enough to see this sort of thing, but as greenkeepers and as superintendents, there's always something going on in summer in Australia. I can tell you just that. And, these two courses as well that I mentioned, just Catalina and Penrith, they're not the only ones that are going to be dealing with this sort of weather at the moment. There's been storm fronts all over the east coast of Australia, and certainly lately of the northeastern parts of New South Wales, the northern tablelands of New South Wales and southeastern Queensland have been copping an absolute flogging with rain. So there's plenty of golf courses out there that are copping heaps of damage, and the greenkeeping staff across all of Australia, again, have got their work cut out for them this summer. And the greenkeeping staff and these courses that I talk about have probably, they've got the water pumps out, they've got the rakes out and the chainsaws, and they're at the ready instead of the hoses that were at the ready of last year. So quite a different change, but still plenty of work to do. Now, I'll go from one extreme to another. You've probably all heard about Western Australia is dealing with pretty good bushfires this year, or pretty bad bushfires, I should say, this year. And back in episode 10, I talked about Kwinana Golf Club, just south of Perth. They had remodeled one of their bunkers at that time when I was talking about it. Well, bushfires over in WA this year are burning very, very close to Kwinana, south of Perth, only around 3 kilometres north of the golf course itself. So that's close. And if you've ever had anything to do with bushfires, and you'll know that that's not far away at all, it only takes a very minor change for everything to go pear-shaped, and all of a sudden you've gone from being safe to being totally in danger. So that's 3 kilometres. I can tell you now, I've unfortunately been close to bushfires, very close, where you're getting the house prepared, because growing up in the Blue Mountains, we had that cycle of 7-year cycle of bushfires and that sort of stuff where, got the house ready. You weren't sure what was going to happen, if wind was going to change, and you prepare it to leave and do the best you can to try and protect it before you're out. But fortunately, it didn't happen to us. We're only at the preparation stages. But I can tell you now, that's hairy enough, don't worry. And over there, anyone that's within cooee of these bushfires, it's devastating, it's scary, and they're dealing with it over there in Perth. Different to the east coast of Australia, like I said, the west coast is usually dry when the east coast is wet, and they're dealing with the fires over there in WA, and certainly wish the best for all those people that are near those bushfires and hope they stay safe for sure. One last point for walking the fairways in this episode, and I'm just it's a little teaser. I don't normally do this stuff, but a little tease. There's a new golf course that looks like it's going to get started soon in Tassie near Hobart. Now, I won't tell you any more. I won't tell you what it's called yet, unless you know. And there's a couple of you out there that do know. But very, very soon, hopefully, I'll be talking to the people behind the project to get you some more information about it and just to try and bring to light just what's going on. It sounds very, very exciting. It looks very, very exciting. I've seen a couple of photos of the location, and this is something that's snuck under the radar, and just looking forward to hearing about it from the people themselves that are behind the project, not hearsay and not anything that I'm sort of stumbling across and hearing about, but the real people behind the project. So I'll leave it at that. Stay with me on it, but I'm going to let you know as soon as I find out, guys. But that's Walking the Fairways for episode 13. We'll keep moving on right now. Welcome once again to the Greenkeepers Shed. Now, this is my segment where I get to tell you all a little bit of information, try to give you a bit more of an insight on some of the background things that go on in looking after a golf course, and hopefully some of the things that will give you either a little bit more of appreciation as to what you're playing on and what it takes to get that playing surface or the whole golf course and bring it all together, what it takes to do all that. And I'm going to talk about the battle of keeping the greens. When I talk about the battle of keeping the greens, I'm talking about just how much effort and how many resources and all the tools and the infrastructure and everything that goes into keeping those putting surfaces that we play on, that's basically 50% of our golf that's played on the putting greens, what it takes to look after those surfaces. And we all know that golf greens are probably the biggest talking point on a golf course. It's where we play, like I said, about 50% of golf is played on the putting greens itself throughout the course, and the 18 greens or 9 greens, however many greens are on the course that you're playing. But you might not realize just how much goes in. We all know that, things like mowing goes on, obviously, daily on a golf green. There's rolling that happens on a golf green and this is all done by the maintenance staff. There's dethatching, there's top dressing and dusting and that sort of stuff. But there's some other bits and pieces. And we know that watering goes on, obviously, to grow the grass. But I'm going to give you some details of each of those points. And there's some things that hopefully you'll get, like I said, a bit more of an appreciation as to just some of the detail of what goes on. When it comes to mowing, things you may or may not know, mowing happens usually in the growing season every day. It's not only once every day. Sometimes, depending on events and tournaments and championship events and things that go on at your local club, sometimes we do a double cut. Now, on an average, I'll say an average green, and I can speak for my courses that I've worked on, 18-hole golf courses in the Blue Mountains, you're looking at just over a hectare of green. So it's quite small surfaces in total. With a ride-on greens mower, it used to take anywhere from sort of 2.5 to 3 hours, depending on the operator, to mow all the greens with one person. Now, if we were having championship events or open events or something like that, we might double cut the greens in 2 different directions, and that would increase the time to cut all the greens. You might send 2 guys out with 2 mowers because it would not quite double the amount of time because of the transport time in between the greens, but it might take one person closer to 4.5 to 5 hours. It might take 2 people 2.5 hours, for example, or 2 hours. So you're double increasing your labour, and then all the knock-ons from there, fuel usage and all that sort of stuff. So there's a little bit more that goes on with mowing, and some golf courses don't use ride-on greens mowers. A lot of regional courses, more sort of general access, public access courses, membership public access courses will often have ride-on greens mowers. You'll get to the top end of the full private golf courses, your Royal Sydneys and the likes of that'll use, and even, there's plenty of courses that do it. They use walk behind greens mowers. Now they take a hell of a lot more time to mow. You need a lot more labour to do that. You're using 1 cutting unit per person, whereas a ride-on greens mower uses 3 cutting units to mow the greens when you do one direction, because the machine itself carries 3 cutting units, whereas the walk behind ones is only 1 cutting unit. So it takes basically 3 times longer to mow a green with a walk behind mower than it does with a ride on greens mower. And you can extrapolate those numbers out, obviously, like I said. So, if it takes, for example, one person with a ride on greens mower that carries 3 cutting units, say it takes around numbers 3 hours to mow, or you can basically translate that to a single walk behind cutting unit would take 3 times longer. So instead of it taking 3, it takes 9 hours. And you don't do that because it takes all day. You've got to get the greens cut before the players go out. So you'll use 3+ people with 3 walk behind mowers, and they'll cut 6 greens each, for example. And that's how you'll get your morning cut done in that 3 hours. So it takes 3 times as much labor to cut your greens. But the differences of a walk behind is it's not carrying the weight of the greens mower itself, which is a machine, it's a vehicle, is not leaving wheel tracks on your green surface. And there's all those little bits of knock-ons that we think about as superintendents maintaining greens and the quality of surface that you want to deliver. So that's a little bit about mowing and some of the machinery that are used and how long it takes to look after, to mow the greens. And you'll do that 5, 6, sometimes 7 times a week. So there's always someone out on the golf course mowing, and certainly in growing season, peak growing season time, when you've got events on the weekends, so open events, like I said, championship events, that sort of stuff, pro-ams, big club competitions, they're being cut on the weekends, both days, Saturday and Sunday. So there's labour out on the golf course maintaining those greens just to mow them 7 days a week sometimes. There's no day off. So you have a rotating staff of the grounds crew that some work weekends, some work morning, some work afternoon, some work during the week, you break it all down and what suits and what you can get the best out of your team. So there's a lot of thinking that goes behind how to mow your greens to get the best surface out of them in regards to mowing, and the regime that you want to use as a superintendent to bring the best out in those surfaces. And if you add different grass types and different climates, different soil conditions and different weather patterns, you can think that there's endless possibilities and endless scenarios. That's just mowing. I want to move to rolling. Now, we all have seen rollers being used, and we've seen them used in tournaments on television. We've seen them probably used at our local club. We've seen them used on clubs that we've gone and visited, and we've certainly played golf courses where they don't use rollers. Rollers are a little bit more of they're becoming more widespread. A lot of public access courses these days and courses that have got a little bit less money to play with are now starting to gain access to rolling machines because they're cheaper to buy secondhand. There's a lot of secondhand stuff being moved down through the clubs from the top tier courses that buy them after 10 years or something like that. They'll start to sell them on, and other clubs will, with a little bit less money, will say, we can afford that now and we'll roll once a week and that sort of stuff. But rolling is a key to providing a good quality golf green surface. Rolling, again, you add that on top of your mowing, and in courses where they use mowing and rolling can sort of cut your mowing in half. So you'll have a longer grass leaf and you can roll, so it's better resistant to dry periods and disease pressures and that sort of stuff because it's got a longer leaf. But you can still provide a smooth, fast surface because it's being rolled with the weight of a machine. And there's a lot of science that goes in behind the rollers and the way that the rollers themselves are set up and how the machine operates. And there's a fair bit to it, but rolling is a wonderful addition if golf clubs can afford to purchase a roller. And I'm a big advocate for rolling. I think it's a great thing, and it certainly does help to no end with all those things that I mentioned before in terms of heat stress, dry stress, water management on your green, disease control, pest control, that sort of stuff, just leaving the grass leaf that little bit longer. So you can provide a truer, faster, smoother surface with a longer leaf than you can if you're mowing more often to keep it shorter and keep it faster. So there's a little bit of positive, or there's a lot more positives that come out of having a roller in your maintenance regime of keeping the green surfaces. So you can move away from mowing a little bit, and go into adding a roller into your surface preparation on your golf greens. But again, it takes X amount of time, and usually it takes sort of, again, three or so hours for one person to roll our 1.2 hectares of golf greens that we had, but it needs labor, and it's not always usable. If you have heavy rain and you've got a few steep slopes and things on your putting surfaces and your greens, rollers don't quite work so well because they require a nice dry surface so that they can maintain their traction in the way that the machine operates and moves. It can be a little bit difficult to use them sometimes if you've got steeper surfaces on a wet surface, on a very wet surface after rain and that sort of stuff. So there's limitations to where rollers are good as well. If you've got some nice big mounding, it can be a little bit not so great. And they can, if not used very well, you can overdo them and really blow out the speeds of your greens, and all of a sudden they can become unplayable with a dry, windy afternoon, for example. So they require a little bit more thought into how they're mixed into the regime. But again, that's labour. In maintenance of a green, I've talked about renovations, and we know about coring and tining and spiking the greens, that sort of stuff. But I've also talked about dethatching greens. And again, there's a couple of different machine types that can be used for removing that dead material, that dead grass leaf and root matter combined that's in the sort of just below the surface of the grass leaf in a golf green. Again, this can be done. We were doing it during the growing season. We were doing it once a week just to really keep the surface thin, remove that dead material. More labour, yet again, more labour. And I talk about that. This is the things that are required to look after only the putting green surface area of a golf course, right? Just think about the size of a golf course and think about the size of the greens in the overall space of a course. This is just on that area. Dethatching, you've got to use your machine, and there's a couple of different types. Walk behinds if you want to do a little bit more, scarifying heavier stuff, dethatching lighter stuff on drivable greens mowers with different attachments that can go onto it. Go out there and dethatch the surface. If it's weekly, like we were doing during the growing season, Katoomba, you would then have to do a little bit of cleanup. Because that sometimes, if it's a little bit wet, or if it's a dewy morning, it doesn't work so well. And then you mow behind it just to get that extra bit of cleanup and extra cut. So that's all of a sudden now it's two machines are going out, you're dethatching and you're cutting with the greens mower just to improve a surface regularly and keep it nice and thin and nice and smooth. So again, dethatching can take anywhere sort of 4.5. We found 4.5 to 5 hours. And then you've got the machine to go in behind to mow the greens and clean up the little bits of grass material that's laying on the surface behind the dethatching mower. So all of a sudden you've got two people basically working most of the day just to do that one job. And they happen once a week. So more labour. And this is what I'm talking about. We move into things like dusting on a golf green and top dressing, light top dressing. And this helps with managing thatch and managing your thatch in the surface as well, and helps just to promote a little bit more microorganism interaction in the surface too, and it's a real positive. They found that dusting just really helps the surface overall with all the different interactions that are going on in the putting green surfaces. And dusting requires a cost of the sand. You want something that's very specific type of sand that dries out nice, it rubs in well. You get out there, you've got to have a machine that goes out there. We don't do it by hand anymore in a modern world. Gone are the days of having an army of people with shovels and level lawns to rub it in. Now we have machines, and they're expensive machines. We have top dressing machines. You have front end loaders to load them up, or Bobcat. You've got a machine, a small tractor, or a utility vehicle that tows the top dresser. Then you have another machine that'll have a drag mat or a rubbing in broom, or even level lawns, or you have a few guys, staff members by hand to go and do it, depending on the size of your golf course. Dusting is a big exercise. It's a very expensive tool in maintenance of a golf green, is dusting. But if you are able to do it, you reap the rewards of being able to do it. But it is expensive. Some of these machines, you're talking $10,000+ just for the top dressing unit. Then you've got to pull the machine apart. If it's a utility vehicle and it's doing other things throughout the year, you might have to change it over, put the towing attachments on it so you can tow the top dresser around. Then you've got to have your front end loader. If that's doing different jobs throughout the year, you then got to take it off those jobs to come and do this job. If you don't have that, how do you load it up? Do you hire a machine? Do you hire a local contractor? Are you doing it by hand with shovels? Honestly, you probably wouldn't do that anyway, because you're talking the best part of maybe 10 to 20 tonne used on a golf course, potentially, depending on the surface of your golf greens. If you see people maintenance people, grounds crews, greenkeepers out there dusting a golf course, they've got money, no doubt. It's usually a top end course of some type, and it's an expensive exercise. Don't get me wrong, and there's a lot of labour to dusting a golf course as well. So that's another one that uses labour, and in this maintenance regime of looking after greens, and it's done usually on courses that have this regime in their greens maintenance. It's done every fortnight throughout the growing season. So again, a hell of a lot more labour, and you've got to get it in timing with weather, with timing with golf competitions and players. If you've got corporate events, if you've got social group bookings, if you've got competitions, if you've got, you can consider and top dressing, dusting a golf course, the greens on a golf course might take half a day, and then rubbing it in. And then you think about, as a player, you're out there and you've played on dusted greens. It's a little bit sandy. It's a little bit slower sometimes. Are you in between the top dresser and the guy rubbing it in? Have they watered it afterwards? All these things happen. All these things are going on, maintaining the golf green daily, weekly, fortnightly, monthly throughout the growing season, especially, and depending on which part of Australia you're in as to how much of the year is growing season. The further north we go, obviously it's growing for probably a little bit longer as well. But again, that's something else that's being managed on a golf green. And there's so much work done. It's not just, a lot of people think of golf greens as we go out there and we just mow it and keep the grass short. I'm trying to show you how much more is involved in maintaining that surface. And when you play a golf course that's got a really good quality surface, chances are they're doing all these things. And they've got, they might have 10, 12, 14 people, staff members looking after the golf course as a whole, because so many are looking after the golf greens. Like I said, remember that 50% or so, there or thereabouts, of your golf is played on the putting surface. You think about how many putts you've had. If you've had a bad round of 36 putts, maybe it's not 50%, it might be 40% of golf of your round is played on the putting green, but it's pretty damn close to a hell of a lot of golf. So, and that's why the focus of maintenance is on there, because it requires so much work to deliver those really, really good surfaces. Another thing that's considered by superintendents and their teams in maintaining a golf green is traffic control. Now, you might be thinking, what do I mean by traffic control? Well, what I mean is where the hole is located and how much traffic is happening that day, whether it be from a competition, social groups, corporate bookings, all those sorts of things, in around a sort of a 3-meter radius of that hole. Everyone is walking up to either putt it in or pick up their ball from in the hole. And that area, the closer you get to the golf hole location on the green, the more concentrated the footprints. Now, if you have a big competition day, you might have 180, 200 people. Everyone's walking up to every one of those golf holes, all on the same spot, pretty much, all around that putting hole, the golf hole. What that does is that puts pressure on the grass, because it's literally under foot pressure. It's copying traffic. It's being beaten by footprints. Trees don't like it when you pull them over. Small shrubs don't like it if you pull them over, if the wind bashes them. Well, this is a little bit the same. You're walking on top of, you go and walk on top of a plant. Doesn't really like bouncing back up in a hurry. But we're asking the grass to do that all the time. So if you have a hot day of 30 degrees, say it's windy in the afternoon, 25, 30 kilometre an hour winds, low humidity, 180 people playing golf, and you've got 18 holes in a 3-meter radius where everyone's walking on it. There's a lot of wear and tear on that area. And you screw your feet a little bit. You don't notice when you walk. You pick it up, you turn. All those things have an effect on the leaf. And sometimes by the afternoon, you'll start to see that area around the hole starting to look a little bit of a brown tinge, discoloration. It can start to scuff a little bit. That's because it's had 180 people go over it. And depending on, the time of the year, as to how the grass is affected by that traffic. So traffic is a big thing to consider. And there's pockets on golf greens where the soil just doesn't hold water very well, or the root depth of the grass in that area is not very good. And we as superintendents and greenkeepers know those areas very, very well. We intimately know every square metre of the golf green. We'll know with our eyes closed where we need to go and hand water the next day after a warm day. Just we know which areas go off faster than others. So if a golf hole location is put somewhere, we'll usually know which areas are going to go off in hot, dry weather. So the golf hole won't go there as regularly, say, on a large competition event, if it doesn't need to go there. And if it does, we've got to think about how we're going to manage that after it's gone there. Can we recover that bit of turf fast enough so it doesn't die off and cause damage to the putting surface? Because then when it's damaged, and it's permanently damaged, and there's a delay in the recovery of the grass, there's going to be a scar, and then it's going to look aesthetically, it's not going to look as good. People will start asking questions, is there a problem there? And all these things open up. So you've got to manage where the hole locations go. Sometimes it's dictated by clubs and committees on certain events. Usually, and I've had this talk in my podcast before about hole locations, it's dictated to by the superintendents and the greenkeepers that are out changing holes. And you've got to consider traffic. You've got to consider what it does to the grass and whether the grass can handle it happening, being located in that specific area. And that goes across all 18 greens. So traffic control is a big thing. You got to think about where people walk off a green. Are they going to walk between bunkers as they exit the hole location? So once they've finished the hole, are the bunkers around a green forcing people to channel off in a path-like way after they leave the golf hole and off the surrounds? And sometimes that can really put high wear areas on the edges of the greens as well. So all these things to consider about traffic control on a golf green. Watering. We all know grass gets watered on a golf course if we want to keep it alive and keep it growing properly and keep it usually green. Grass is usually green when it's growing. But watering is a big one because we, again, need to consider how much water we've got to put out. What's the weather like in the forecast ahead for the day? Again, traffic control and where potential. How much golf is happening on the green that day? Where's the hole located? Where is there going to be increased traffic? Where might we need to water to regenerate and recover the grass after that day's play? If it's raining, how soft does the green get? Is it going to footprint after a competition or during a competition if there's heavy rain forecast before or during an event? So you've got to think about how that affects the green and again, goes back to hole locations. But watering, we don't want to water if we've got a big event on because it might soften the greens too much and it makes it a little bit more of target golf. We want to try and keep them a little bit drier, gets them a little bit firmer, they putt a little bit better. If they're overwatered and you have 180 people turn up on a dull day, a cool day, that water's not being utilized by the plants. If you overwater, you can have footprinting by the end of the day's play with a lot of people, a lot of foot traffic. You can have an area that might stay wet for too long and you can have other issues come about from that. And I'll talk about that in a second. So watering is a big thing. Usually it's to do with dry areas and the heat of the day and the wind in the day and the humidity of the day. And a lot of times you'll see guys out watering in afternoons, especially on weekends. We might go in and see that the greens might need an extra lick of water. Some areas it might only need a hand water with a hose. I often used to work weekends as superintendent. You duck in on the Saturday afternoons after the competition and go, right, I know that it's warm enough today. It's 25 degrees and it's been windy. So chances are there's some edges of the greens that I've got to hand water. I don't want to turn the watering cycle on because that will be too much water for 90% of the green. So I'll go out there with a hose for 3 hours and I'll just spot water areas that dry out first. Tops of mounds, like high points on greens, will often dry out first. Greens that are a little bit higher on the golf course in general might dry out first. Greens that are in more sun during the day will dry out first. But if I put a watering cycle on, the greens that don't use as much water or don't need more water will then be softer. And you'll have this polarizing period during a round where you've got greens that are too soft and the other ones are just perfect to play on. So we need to consider how much water is going out onto our golf greens to try and give you as a player consistent surface to putt on throughout your 18 holes. Now that's very hard to do because you have shade, you have sun, you have wind, you have different exposure levels for all of those elements and the different lay of the land. Some greens are built into the ground surrounding them. Some are elevated above the ground surrounding them, so they drain better. The ones built into the ground might hold more water. And depending on the irrigation system that you have, you can have different things come about from having too much water or not having enough water. So watering is a big thing to manage, a very, very big element to manage on a golf course, on putting greens, on golf greens. It's a very difficult one, and usually the limiting factor is the irrigation system. And that, at Katoomba, where I was, it wasn't an automatic system. We didn't have in-ground sprinklers at all. It was hoses and knocker sprinklers that we used to have to move around manually by hand. We'd come to work. I'd go to work at 3 a.m. You'd try and turn the watering on, and you'd drive around and move the sprinklers around on each green every so often, depending on the time of year and how much water you wanted to put out on the golf course. But that made life very difficult. But these days, with modern systems, if clubs are able to afford it and put them in, they're computer controlled, sensor controlled, sometimes weather controlled. There's so many things that are automatically managed that as a superintendent, you can nearly just sort of set the times a little bit. And the rest of it's sort of kind of looked after. You still got to oversee it, but it's less manually intensive, less labor intensive. So watering is a really big thing to manage on your golf greens, and it can affect the game of golf so much when you're out there as a player. But something to think about when you're out there, you want to look and see what you can feel in that moisture content of your surfaces, walking on them, putting them. You can get a sense through all these things that we do to maintain them. It will affect how you play golf, but you need to start looking for these things. You need to start to try and say, hey, the greens that were dusted on Friday, I'm playing on Saturday, they might be a little bit slower because I'm playing in the morning and it's a bit of a dew. So they're all the things you want to pick up when you're out there playing golf as a player. The other thing I'm going to talk about is pest control and disease control. Now, golf greens are monocultures. We provide lots of water to them. They're out exposed in the elements. There's lots of bugs, lots of diseases by way of fungus, bacteria, especially with water. It's a big transmission way of happening out throughout the plants. And pests will come in from all corners of the world. They'll come in from your surrounds, and they'll seasonal. They'll egg hatch. They'll sit in the soil for a while and hatch at the right temperatures, the right times of the year. You'll have them, that's really the art of greenkeeping, or as a key to the art of greenkeeping, is managing your pests and diseases, and know when things are going to get out of hand before they get out of hand, knowing the early signs and symptoms to pick up. You're a bit of a doctor of grass as a superintendent, as a greenkeeper. You have to pick up the signs of when things are going wrong. Now, golf greens my wife and I have recently had our little baby Savannah. She's now 5 months old and growing, beautifully well, and we're loving the beauty of watching her grow. But as a parent, and when it's your first child like ours, you worry about their temperature, you worry about their health, you worry if they've eaten something, have they licked something, what bugs are out there that they're going to ingest, what can go wrong. You're always wondering, are they okay? Like I said, have they got a temperature? That's the first sign of something not being right. Do I go to the doctor now? Do I go to the doctor in a few hours? Make sure everything's okay. Do I go early? Am I silly for going early? Do I think I know what I'm looking for now that she's this old and we know some of the signs and symptoms? Has she got a cough? Is she sneezing? Was it dust? Is there a bug? All these sorts of things. Golf greens are no different to being a parent looking after a baby. Greenkeepers looking after golf greens. It's the same kind of a similar analogy. And when it comes to pest and disease, you have to try and pick up the early symptoms and signs. And it's sometimes very confusing. Grass doesn't make noise. It doesn't cry like a baby. It doesn't overheat like a baby. It doesn't get a temperature. But you've got to pick up the visual cues. You've got to pick up you've got to go out there and look for signs sometimes that they might not be there, but you know that the weather's just about right for things to go wrong. And that sounds a bit funny to say it's just about right for something to go wrong. That's what happens. If it's too hot, if it's too wet, if it's too humid, you have to pick up on these little signs. You have to do a little bit of investigating. It's long before it's visible to the average naked eye, being a player and a golfer. That's our job. We have to have trained eyes. It's the same as a doctor. We've got to know where to look and what to look for. And when it comes to pests and diseases, some of the signs are the grass leaf might be changing color slightly. might be going a little bit of tan, might be going a little bit of yellow, might get spots, might get some unusual growth habits. It might be a little bit of a funky looking leaf. It might be pitted. It might be standing upright. It might be, all these little things. And you think about when you stand there as a player and look at the golf green and go, looks fine to me because it's green. But then tomorrow, it's got spots all over it, like big patches, like the size of your wallet, can happen overnight, instantly, in a flash. Overnight, dewy night, humidity's high, 25 degrees overnight, had rain 3 days earlier, and all of a sudden disease goes, it's time for me to break out the party. And it will literally start showing visual signs on your green. But as a greenkeeper, we knew that it was raining 3 days earlier. We knew the last 3 days it's been very high humidity. We knew that it's been overcast, and we knew that the temperatures were high at night. So we go, right, the forecast says that that's going to happen for the next few days. We need to consider whether we put out a preventative fungicide to control the minimal amounts of disease and fungus that's out there growing unseen because it's microscopic before it starts to affect the grass. Do we put it out now? Are we able to put it out now? Is it a waste of money if we put it out now? Because they're not cheap. Sometimes it costs about upwards of $500 to $1,000 to put one application over your greens, depending on the size of your green surface, to protect the green for 2 weeks. So think about those numbers. It might cost $500 to $1,000 or more to put a product out that will protect the grass on your greens for 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks. Now, how many fortnights are there from, say, September to April? There's a few. Now, you don't need to use them every 2 weeks. And the job of a greenkeeper is to be selective, and you've got budgets, and you've got to think about how much money you're spending, because it's not cheap to run a golf course. It's not cheap to maintain a golf course, but it's also very, very expensive to repair a golf green, to re-turf half a golf green. That's a lot more money. So it's a fine line balancing act. So for us, I can speak about us in the Blue Mountains. Common disease that we would get through our greens in summertime, we say dollar spot. Little white patches, white circles, anywhere from 5-cent coin to a 50-cent coin. And if you let them go, they'll get much bigger. Size of your mobile phone. The thing about dollar spot was that when it affects a golf green, it really pits out the surface once it's affected the leaf. And after about 5 days, there's a depression, slight depression. So if you had dollar spot on a golf green, it will get quite bumpy, scarring afterwards. And it would take a good couple of months to grow that back out, maybe 4 to 8 weeks to grow that back out with new leaf grown from the crown of the plants in the, on the green surface. So, but for the best part of 4 to 8 weeks, it's bumpy, slightly bumpy, depending on if you have, top dress it to make it smooth or whatever. But we had to pick the weather conditions. So they start out quite small. You got to pick them, and they're bright white. Looks like, a sheet of paper. A4 paper white, kind of. And you got to know the weather conditions. You got to know when it's coming. Some golf courses go with a regime of preventative is better than cure. So they'll have a budget and a program of putting out products to cover their greens to protect them throughout the year. Now, that's probably the best case scenario, but it's not a scenario or a program that I used to like to use. Not only because it's expensive, but also because you're using more often than not synthetic products. I'll say chemicals because that's what they are. And you use them safely and all that sort of stuff. But it's like using antibiotics for the sake of using antibiotics in your body. If you've got a cough, you don't go to the doctor and say, I need antibiotics. They might say, you don't really need anything. It's not that bad. You'll get over it in a week. Or if you've got the flu or if you've got a cold, you don't go and take antibiotics. Sometimes it doesn't even work because it's a virus, and antibiotics are for bacteria and all that sort of stuff. But I'm loosely trying to use an analogy here for you. What I'm saying is that you have to be very careful when you use chemicals, because we're learning all this. The general public are learning about this now with the virus, with COVID, right? We've heard about these mutations in COVID. So with diseases in golf greens, it's no different. The life cycle is so fast that if you use the same chemical to deal with that particular disease, be it fungus, bacteria, whatever, it will, after a number of applications of that particular chemical and the way that that chemical works, the disease will have a mutation and will become resistant to that chemical. Now, when you manage a golf course, this is a very, very big issue that can occur very, very quickly. And good superintendents out there have a good rotation policy, and they only really use the chemicals when they need to be used. And it's to prevent a mutation that will become resistant to a particular chemical. Because the last thing anyone needs is to lose a tool in managing disease out of your repertoire. No one wants to lose a tool altogether. And there's only limited tools, let me tell you. And everything costs money. So you have to be very, very selective how you do it. But what I was getting at with dollar spot is that it can come in so quick overnight. If you didn't spot the signs fast enough, you can have, and I'd seen it happen where 40% of the golf green could have basic little spots of dollar spot all over it overnight. So if you're working on a Friday, greens are looking Mickey Mouse, the weather's a bit iffy and you've had lots of rain. If you don't come in over the weekend and you come in on Monday, you've already had 2 days of a disease starting to take over and affect your grass on your greens. And by then, it's too late. There's already going to be damage that you can't stop. And then you've got to repair it. So it's too late. Now, I'll give you a scenario. Think about public holidays. Same thing. This is why greenkeepers often work during holiday season. Nearly always work during a holiday season. And it's because you can't really let a golf green go like a child. You can't let them like a baby. You can't let them go without someone keeping an eye on them every day. This is the thing. So whilst we mow, roll, dust, traffic control, dethatch, all that sort of stuff to maintain good surfaces, it's the watching to make sure nothing's coming in to cause a problem that has to happen every day as well. So disease control is a big, big thing. And to pick the signs very early takes a trained eye, no doubt, and good experience, but it can happen so fast. There's a disease called Pythium, for example. Now, some of you may or may not have heard of it. It's a disease that can be devastating in 12 to 24 hours. And it can literally kill grass dead that will not regrow in that time frame, in summer, in the peak of summer. And we've seen those seasons happen in Sydney. I won't name the courses where it's happened to in Sydney, but there has been plenty of them around over the last, half dozen years that have been ravaged by Pythium. And it happens very, very quick. And you have to be on your game to stop it from devastating your golf course or your golf greens. And you can wipe out 30% of your greens. No worries. 30% of the surfaces. And you'll have pits, you'll have bare areas, you'll probably have to re-turf them because it doesn't regrow, or you've reseed them. That takes a hell of a lot longer. Turf's expensive, seed's cheap. The payoff is time. Turf is expensive. You can get a surface back in a few weeks. Seed is cheap. It's going to take you a few months. You just don't want to go down the road of Pythium devastating your greens. And that's a really, really difficult one because of the speed at which it comes in. And I'm literally talking overnight. You can leave a golf course in the afternoon, come back in the morning and go, oh shit, it's too late. We're going to have some loss. We need to minimize how much we're going to lose. And we need to go and treat it now. And you go out with a fungicide, chemical that will go out there and knock the disease down. But then you've got to mop up the mess and deal with what's already happened. And that's really, really on-edge stuff. Same thing happens with pests. I know at the Blue Mountains that we used to get, and all golf courses are affected by it, we would get a pest called Argentinian stem weevil. Now, weevil is basically a pest that can, again, come in overnight, and it can eat through your grass. I say come in overnight. It can happen overnight. It can occur overnight where the weevil will eat through your grass and kill it from the bottom up. So it cuts off the way that a plant works internally. It's effectively, just to make life easy, it's like ring barking a tree. This is just the simplest way I can make it. It's not the same, but it's kind of like ring barking a tree, where it'll stop all of the carbohydrates and sugars moving throughout the plant, and the leaf will die in an instant. So you can go home in the afternoon, 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, everything's looking hunky-dory, come in the morning and have basically half of your green dead in front of you. And when I say dead, it's dead to us because it's already happened. The golfer won't see it for a few days afterwards until it's literally brown and gone. But we'll be able to pick the signs up and go, oh shit, we have to do something with it. And you'll go out and treat the stem weevil and manage them with a product. And then you will have to mop up the mess. And again, the grass is dead. You've got to regrow it. And they come in usually from the surrounds into your golf greens from the edges. And that's where you can pick them up early, is if some of the grasses in your surrounds are starting to turn off color. And it depends. Now there's products out there that everything costs money. If you can afford to do it, you can go preventative at certain times of the year. I knew that when it got to mid-December in the mountains, because it doesn't get as hot as Sydney, when it got to mid-December, we were looking every day. We were doing our tests through early December to see how much the population of stem weevil was growing. So we were managing that, and you can check that out through your clippings that you collect from mowing your greens, having a look at the population. If we started to notice a few too many weevils, and we just had our own yardsticks that we would use, if you sat there and you looked at it and you go, right, it's getting close to Christmas, we've got all the public holidays happening, weekends, usually going to come in the week before Christmas. So you would have to pull the trigger and spend the money to deal with it then. Or if you thought you could hang on and not spend the money, and not every club's got money to spend on this stuff. Like I said, an application might cost you $1,000. And I don't know about you, but not every club has it falling out of their back pocket. And it's better to save it than it is to spend it if you don't have to. So, we would have to consider, what's the option? Do we spend the money and knock them down? Or do we need to save the money, and can we run the gauntlet? Everything's sort of okay. We don't know. Like I said, I was always a big fan of, I didn't like to use any sort of products or chemicals if I didn't have to. And that goes with pretty much most superintendents anyway. That's, that they will consider how they use products, because they are synthetic products, like I said. And as a user of the product, you're the one who's most in danger anyway. Not every product's safe. It's not water. These are synthetic products, and there is an element of danger in using them, while some are much worse than others, and usually those much worse ones are not used at all anyway. They're available there if needed. And there is another side to that as well, where there's now a raft of natural products that can be used to fight diseases and pests in golf course applications and in sports turf applications. I remember using a product, and I would always go and try and hunt this stuff down, because I like to deal with more natural-based products, more organic-based products. And if they're natural and organic, people have got to understand something as well. Just because it's natural and just because it's organic and it comes from the natural world does not mean it's safe. There are dangers to using natural and organic products, because at the end of the day, they're used to deal with and treat, and usually by way of treating, it's to kill the pest in question. There is an element of danger to the user just the same. So it's not all, rainbows and ribbons for using natural and organic products, because they can be dangerous just the same, not as much so, but certainly dangerous, on your skin and that sort of stuff to ingest. So you still have to be careful. Everything that's used out on a golf course, whether it's organic-based, natural-based, or a synthetic-based product, still has to be used safely and wisely. But there are some great organic-based products, and when dealing with certain diseases and things, I used to hunt down, there's some microorganism-based products where they actually try and outcompete the bacteria and the fungus in question, or the virus or whatever it might be, there's specific ones that we would use that would feed on the pest that you were trying to get rid of, whether it be a bacteria or whatever. So at a microscopic level, they would feed on the bacteria that would cause disease. So, once we started to go down that path of finding, it opened up another world, and it was nice to be able to, it's just a feel-good thing. They had their challenges just the same as synthetics do, different modes of action, as we call it, different ways that it would deal with the pests that you were trying to control. But it doesn't matter what it is, synthetic or organic, there are still plenty of challenges, and they don't last out there forever. You put them out, they have a very short time frame that they give control. Maximum is usually 21 days in some sort of serious pressure case scenario. So, after that, you've still got to go back to the drawing board and start again. Yeah, that gives you a bit of an idea on the products that we use and go out there and what's involved in managing pest and disease control. When we're out looking after golf courses, golf greens on golf courses, it's high risk, especially during the growing season, that things can happen so quickly. And it's something I want you guys to understand out there when you're out there putting on your golf green, just how fast or just how much work's got to be done on a golf course to maintain the greens, labor-wise, money-wise, but also how quickly, and I just wanted to tell you those couple of examples of how fast something can go wrong on a golf green. It's really, really interesting. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of the first episode for the year 2021. Didn't have any interviews this time, and there was, just eased into the year. We're just walking the fairways in the Greenkeepers Shed. I've got quite a few things planned on the horizon. As I mentioned in the last episode at the end of last year, I'll be soon to be doing a piece on Moore Park and the history of Moore Park Golf Course as well. Got some interviews coming up. They're lined up. There's plenty coming on board, so I hope you can stay with me. As always, please share, like, promote, talk to other people, family and friends, tell them about the podcast. I love them. I love the fact that you guys are listening. I really appreciate you taking the time out to listen to what I've got to say, listen to the people that I'm talking to and the information that I'm sharing with you. Hopefully you find it useful. That's the idea behind it. Always want to keep you getting excited about golf. So as always, guys, for the year to start, but as always for the Golf and Greenkeeper podcast and to start the year of 2021, go out and enjoy your golf. You hit them clean and we'll keep them green. Thanks for listening, guys.